The world is saved. The living room's dark, save for light being cast from the big TV screen and the imminent sunrise that's teasing the one starry sky with whispers of morning.
Hey, George.
Hey, Lions, how's it going?
You know, in Dragon Ball Z Abridged, they set up the contrivance that Guru commits suicide as a way of disabling the Dragon Balls. Right?
Yeah.
So the noise that he makes is he says, "Be a pretty dick move to die right now." Yeah. That noise, that's how I'm doing. So I didn't tell you any of this in the pre-show, so I could just get your live reaction. But the start of my last week, it's been a couple weeks since we recorded, but start of my last week was one of my friends had several issues that required me to intervene in the middle of the night. So that was super exhausting. Everybody's fine, right? But exhausting.
Right.
My older daughter had her first ever case of strep throat and was completely down for the count. And then somehow that wasn't the worst illness, because then I had to take my wife to the hospital. She's fine. But I had to deal with all that. So it's been many days of no sleep and everything. And the cherry on top of the insanity Sunday was I'm standing in the hospital next to my wife's bed, just trying to, provide emotional support. And my phone rings and it's my dad. And he's like, "Hey, I just wanted to let you know your grandmother had a fall. She had to go to the hospital, but she's fine. Don't worry. How's everything on your end?" And I just went, I'm actually in the middle of something. So I'll just have to, I'll call her later and make sure she's okay. I just plopped down in the chair and I was like, "All right, life, you win." I don't know. What do you got? Yeah. Asteroids, global warming going to happen tomorrow instead of next week? What are we doing here?
Oh, that's the nice thing about global warming is it's all the time.
That's true. Yeah, it's not going to happen. It's been happening. It's been happening. So I just want to stress again, everyone is fine. Everything turned out, but it was just so many little quick hits that I seriously considered just being I need to go sit in a cool dark room for a day with a sensory deprivation tank.
Well, that is most unfortunate. My last week has been relatively on point. There was one big giant meeting that I had on Thursday, and I was like, "Oh man, this meeting is going to be terrible," because it was an all-day thing. It was an event, and I was leading it. And long story short is that it was a situation where theoretically I'm a facilitator, so I'm facilitating this thing they want to do, but they were being forced to do it, so nobody wanted to do it.
Oh no.
Yeah, and I was just the facilitator, So I was like, "Hey, we need to hit these goals," and they're like, "We don't want to hit those goals." I'm like, "Technically, there's nothing I can do now,"
We have arrived
but I know that the
impasse.
people that are making you do it are going to yell at me if you don't do it. So I was like, this is going to be a stressful mess. But the nice thing is I just took some deep breaths and I went into the meeting, and actually it was worse than I thought it was going to be.
Yay.
It was a tragic dumpster fire, and but I made it through. And the weird thing is, and I imagine that you're probably in the same place, is I got home and I just felt a little weird, And I was like, I don't know what that's about. And then I just went to Megan and I said, "Hey, it's 7:00 in the afternoon. I'm just going to go lay down for a minute." And I woke up at 8:00 the next morning,
Yeah.
And I was like, I didn't know that. Yeah, I was like, I didn't know that was low key stressing me out this whole time. And now that my body has apparently been at 10% fight or flight mode for the last week, it's oh, we're done finally fighting this gorilla that we've been fighting all week. Go sleep.
Yeah.
And I did. And it was nice.
Yeah. I've heard, I don't know if there's actually good science to back this up, but I do think the mental model is appropriate where, people have said, "Oh, your brain doesn't know the difference between I have a big meeting on Thursday and a tiger is about to eat me." Your brain just says, "Oh, there's stress." The difference is the tiger problem is resolved usually immediately, right? You either escape the tiger and you're out of danger, harm's way, or you you get eaten by the tiger and then it's not a problem anymore, right? Whereas things like, family stress, work stress, like societal existential dread, like those are just, they can't really ever be solved fully. Even sometimes like when the event passes, then, you just like drag the emotions with you for ages afterwards. So I don't know if it's a actual scientifically supported thing, but I do like the mental model of like, oh, I've been really freaking out about this big work meeting or whatever for a while. Like I need to try to now recover from that, right? Like just like if you then had to sprint away from the tiger and go hide in a cave, you would like stop to catch your breath, right? It's the same kind of thing. It's just harder and more amorphic, and American society doesn't really praise rest and recovery.
No, it certainly doesn't, because that's the thing that everybody forgets about Dragon Ball Z, is that the Saiyans only got stronger after they fully recovered from the fight.
Right. Which, to be fair, they kept using more and more magical means to foreshorten the recovery time, but the recovery time always happened.
Yeah, that was the important bit, like you needed to be. And I remember, man, I would still pay money for those Frieza recovery chambers, man.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
which would
awesome.
you rather have, the recovery chamber or the sensu bean?
So, like, that's a very fair question, and and I think that the answer is it depends, right? My life as it stands now, the Frieza recovery chamber, because like it would just be nice to once in a while take that 2 hours and just be alone with my thoughts, because then it like mentally resets you as well, But if I was in a situation where I was training for something, where I needed to get into shape, then the sensu bean,
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, but that's my thoughts. But we played some video games.
Thank God there was also some video games. Oh my Lord. Before we talk too much about video games, though, we are going to do a quick shill, because you got to shill, and the shill happens at this point in this episode's document. I know, because I have an outline thing I'm looking at this time.
Thank God somebody's keeping us organized.
Jesus. Mike. Anyway, if you're into, I don't even know how to classify that opening. If anything caught your interest and this is somehow your first episode, welcome. You should subscribe to the show. If someone recommended you start the show and this is your first episode, that's kind of how they all start now. Subscribe, listen more. They're all good. If you want to go above and beyond, you can leave a rating and review, and that's cool. But if you really want to help people find the show, you should send them a specific episode. Maybe this one. Usually a game review, because then they'll have a better idea of what the back catalog is going to look like. And it's just an easier way for somebody to get into it instead of reading that generic review on iTunes. If you want to go super crazy, you can actually support us on Patreon, and everybody who supports us gets the after show for as little as $1. But at the higher levels, you can actually get stuff like stickers and your name shouted out on the show. And that's cool. So for those people, we need to first thank our 4-bit portables, Keith, Josh, Jacob, and David, our 8-bit classics, Kevin, John, Jason, and Yarno, and our 16-bit hero, Michael.
And for $1,000, we will do the gallon once more.
Oh, no.
And if you want to know what the gallon is,
it's going to cost you $1,000.
It's going to cost you $1,000.
Oh.
Yeah, I told you weren't going to like this one.
No, that's... See, I boy who cried wolf by like pretend not liking a few of them. And now we were arrived at one that I'm actually like, I don't know if that's worth $1,000.
It's 2 days at least of your life gone, just
plus all the days it shaves off at the end.
Yes. Yeah, but that's at the end of your life, and those years suck anyways.
Those are the worst days. So we have a mailbag question that I thought was particularly funny for you and I, because we worked in a Blockbuster together. And
we did.
The question is, can you remember the last game you ever rented? Or at least can you remember what era the last game you rented, when you stopped renting games was? So we worked in that Blockbuster during the like kind of PS3, Xbox 360 era. And I know for sure that is my like final era, because one, I'm not counting like the thing you do with like subscriptions and then you download.
I was going to say arguably,
yes.
I'm renting them now.
And you feel free to make an argument for that. I don't think of that way, because I worked in a Blockbuster. Like renting means something very specific to me. Whereas like what you do, I would think of as more like I have a Netflix subscription. But I know that that's the last time I rented a game because there was a game on the PS4. It might have been one of the remasters of like an Uncharted game or something, but there was like a big action set game where like I knew I was probably only going to play it once. And I was like, okay, there's a like a red box, whatever the hell the thing is that they own, GameFly, where you can like, it's like a soda machine for video games and movies. And I almost rented from it. I came so close. And then at the last minute, I just got this like, I don't have the emotional energy to deal with this if this does not go perfectly. Like if I get a disc out of here and it's covered in scratches or it looks like a toddler or a dog chewed on it, like I'm just not going to handle that well, because then instead of spending my precious free time playing the game, I'll be spending my precious free time trying to get a refund from the company so that I can rent another copy of the game. And I'm just like, no, I can't do it. I just can't do it. I will either buy it, I will wait till it's on sale, I will do something else, but I'm not going to put money into this soda machine and get a game out, right? Maybe if it had been like a Blockbuster where I could have stood there and opened the case and looked at the Blu-ray and made sure it was okay, but you can't argue with a soda machine, so I was not willing to have a one-sided customer service interaction with this video game robot. So definitely PS3 era. I wish I could remember exactly what game it was, but it was definitely the PS3 era and from the store we worked at.
Yeah, I honestly think that if I had to guess, I would probably say PS2 era. And the reason why, outside of, again, making the argument that I rent games now, which again, I really enjoy but I would agree with you that it is somewhat fundamentally different because there's no time limit to the rental, so like, it's not like, oh, I rented this thing and I've got a week to play it, so I now need to make life changes,
My God, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but you know what I just realized? I was going to say, oh, haha, it's like you are preemptively paying late fees. But no, that's literally what you're doing. That's what a subscription is like, instead of going in, paying a one-time fee and then risking late fees, you just agree to pay late fees forever. And then you have access to the subscription forever.
Yeah, I mean, kind of, is that they say, it's the, what was it? The movie pass?
Movie pass,
right? Yeah, Movie Pass. It's that where it's just like, hey man, give us this much money and you have as much as you want forever, all of the things forever.
But this is was it World of Warcraft where they changed, you get an experience penalty for overplaying to you get an experience buff for playing less. This is literally that. They took the idea of late fees and said, what if we just make them sound like a positive thing instead of a punitive thing?
Right. I think that the other difference though is that you can rent as many games as you want, right? So,
yes, yeah,
but
yeah, unlimited library access.
Yeah, that being said, though, is that, and again, I don't know all of the technology behind it, but ostensibly, it's a much better business model because it's planned revenue, right? Where it's like, hey, I get, they're going to pay me $60 a year. This is pretty much what my annual subscription revenue is going to be, as opposed to a Blockbuster where it's like you could have good months or bad months. And, sometimes the months were great and you got to have, 7 drinks at the bar right next to the Blockbuster before you came sauntering in to badger your employees. And some of them were lean months where you could only have 3 drinks at the bar before you came in at 11 o'clock to badger your employees. Not that either of us would have known anything about that.
No, I can't imagine a regional director behaving in such a manner. Certainly not toward his 2 star employees.
Exactly. Who could close that thing in 4 minutes. Anyways, I actually think that I'm probably a generation before you because here's the thing is that I always tended to not rent games. I tended to buy them, either at GameStop or what have you. Most of the time, though, because and I think that this, again, kind of addresses the different ways that we approach video games, which is that I am, I'll play a game for 15 minutes and throw it away forever. I don't care, right? But if I play a game, I'll play it for years, like Civilizations, I'm still playing Civilization 6. I just played a game of Civilization 6 like this week, because I was just like, hey, man, I just need a little bit of this, right? I say that to say that because of that, you rented the video games and I would play them. And then if I got past the 15-minute mark, I would then go buy them, So like, I think that the last time it said George Witt rented this game on the receipt, was probably right about the time I met you. Was the last time I rented a video game.
Now they'll be all his expenses.
And so, but I mean, because I remember the way that we bonded. You're the one friend I have that I didn't bond with through D&D specifically. We bonded through Dragon Ball Z Budokai 3.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, we did. And that's how we became friends. And so then after that, though, whenever you'd be like, oh, hey, I saw this new game. I want to try this. And I would just be along for the ride, So like you were kind of the leader of, I want to try this thing. And I'd be like, yeah, man, I'm in for that, And then if I was like, ooh, this is really good, then I would just go buy it and also play it.
Which I think is, again, much like this I don't owe this game anything attitude towards your backlog is like not going into basically anything with unnecessarily pumped up expectations is good. And it seems like it's so uncommon in like entertainment discourse, but like movies right now, because of cinematic universes and video games for quite a while, it's like Tears of the Kingdom came out a few weeks ago as of this recording, and a few people that I follow online, like, it's like, oh, this is your entire personality now. Like you,
yep.
I mean, and the thing, like, I find it a little, it's just annoying to just see people talking nonstop about one and only one thing, especially before it's even released and they have no idea if it's even any good. But then after it came out, I actually found the gushing to be more interesting because they were all gushing about different things, right? Like, oh, my experience is like this and my experience is like that. And I'm doing this and I'm focusing on that over there. And it's like, oh, okay. So now I feel like they're telling stories as opposed to all just jumping up and down, like waiting for the boy band to take the stage. And it's like, oh my God, I love them. And it's like, they have not started playing. Right. So I'm you are still a role model for like how important these things actually are in our lives. And like, we can enjoy them, but maybe don't make it your entire personality.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Actually, Megan said something to me the other day where I was like, that is very high praise. And I will take it because I like when people say nice things about me, but I was like, I've got to let that one not go to my head, which is I said we were talking about this and I said, yeah, basically like video games are entertainment. So I enjoy it while I am playing it. And then I don't think about it when I'm not playing it. Like I don't think about like, what am I going to play next or anything like that. Like I just sit down and play it. And she said, is that like Nirvana? Like, isn't that what you look for, is to like be perfectly in the moment? And I was like, I want to say yes, but like, I feel like saying yes means that I'm not there. I don't know how to deal with that, but I was like, thank you so much for the compliment.
Yes, I am perfect, as you just on your own unprompted brought up. Yes, correct.
As you have said, I am much like the Buddha, and
who was, and I'm pretty sure I'm quoting directly from his scriptures here, kick ass at Call of Duty.
Have you seen Legend of Ragnarok on Netflix?
Don't know that one.
So basically, it is a anime that is amazing in principle and, in my opinion, terrible in execution.
Oh, no.
But the idea is that it's, the gods have decided we're done with people, right? And so we're going to kill them all. But it's a tournament, but the tournament is the best humans throughout history versus all the gods, Greek gods, all of them, right? Like the Greek gods, Adam, like Christian gods, like all of it, it's just all in there. I'm like, that's kind of a cool concept, battle royale between any cool people. So like the first one was, I think, like Lu Bu versus somebody, and the other one was like Adam versus somebody, like stuff like that, right? Poseidon versus an ancient samurai. What?
Aquaman.
Yeah, right. And the problem is that it's 20 minutes of them talking about their backstory and then like 1 minute of fighting. But I found it tolerable if I fast forward, as I'm going through Netflix. So I probably watched like 10 hours of content in about 2. I say all of that to say that, the Buddha is in there, but it's Siddhartha, right? So like, but yeah, when you said like the Buddha is kick ass, and I'm like, he is actually in that one. He's pretty cool.
What does he have a specific style you recognized?
So the season 2 ends with him entering the ring, and the big reveal is, so he's a god, right? But he enters the ring and he's like, I'm fighting for humans, and yes. So that's kind of his thing, is that he's kind of the rogue. He's always kind of sucking on like a lollipop kind of a thing. So I was like, maybe that's supposed to be representative of his like take pleasure in simple joys that happen now, or I'm overthinking it. And some artist said this will be cool.
Yeah, yeah. Tell me if you find out if it's a vinegar lollipop, because that would be a deep cut.
Yeah. But anyways, what are you playing, and why should I care?
So I mentioned before that I got a SteamDeck, and I will have more to say about that. But the immediate benefit was exactly what I was hoping it would be, right? Even with the last week being a complete crap show, and the week before that, like having normal work stuff and, family and life stuff to deal with, it allowed me to slot video games into parts of my life where I was not at a TV with a console or at my PC, right? Which is exactly what I was hoping for. So we're off to a banging start. But I played, we picked for the next episode of Nostalgia Goggles, we're going to be playing Mega Man 2. And I was just like, I want to make sure this is the one I'm thinking that it is. Because the first 6 all kind of like rub together because they all use the same engine and everything. And I sat down and I was like, yeah, okay, this is it. And then it was like, what? And I had finished it, right? I just like, I couldn't like turn once the game started and I heard that familiar music and I thought about like the Wily's Castle music and I saw the select screen with familiar Robot Masters. I was just like, oh my God. So I'm going to have to play through that a couple more times before we record for that episode, since I just like devoured it. Of course, more Final Fantasy 14 forever and ever and ever and ever. I also, played for maybe like an hour Celeste Classic. So like
what is that?
So that game was originally made for the Pico 8 fantasy console. Part of the reason the game looks the way it does is because the Pico 8 is like so hyper restricted. It's more powerful than a Nintendo in certain ways and then more restricted than a Nintendo in other ways. So it's kind of like a weird like Nintendo / Game Boy in its restrictions. And so Celeste Classic is exactly what you would imagine, but just on a way smaller scale, right? So single screen puzzles, there's not a grand story. The puzzles themselves are a little bit simpler. It's Celeste. Like you can absolutely see it and feel it in the gameplay. It's actually pretty impressive how polished it is. I also started a game called, I think it's pronounced Picontier, Picontier, which purports to be like a Harvest Moon, Stardew Valley. It's a life sim, right? Like, oh, you're on a farm and you got to go do some farming. The thing that makes me want to play it more / terrified to play it more is the opening scene of the game. And I'm not going to leave any details out. Like, this is the entire opening scene. You land on this island and there's you and there's a scientist. And the scientist is like, haha, I knew it. This island is rich in like pico matter, like this magical, metal or whatever. It's like, we can definitely do our research here. And then it smash cuts through a black screen and it's like a few years later and you're in his lab and he's like, okay, I'm going to turn the machine on. So just to be safe, go back to the house and go into the basement, just like we've done every other time we turn the machine on. Haha, see you soon. And then it cuts to you in the basement and there's like a little locked door and there's a ladder. When you get near the ladder, a robot pops out of the ground like a monolith, like a big gray with a face in the middle. And he's like, hey, I named myself Lions, right? So he's like, hey, Lions, it feels like it's been a little while since we talked. According to my records, it's been 259,000 days. And I was just like, so you go upstairs and there's a town, like a charming little Harvest Moon town with charming little Harvest Moon people. And you go and you talk to them and they all say some version of the same thing, which is like a normal thing, like, oh, good weather today. And then a denial that a huge amount of time has passed thing. Like, I was surprised to see how dusty the china was this morning when I was getting breakfast. And just like everyone around town is like trying to go about their normal lives, but also seems vaguely aware that something has happened. But then all of that stops And I played for like 2 or 3 more hours, and all you do is normal life sim stuff. You have to learn how the watering can works and how you get seeds and where you go to fight monsters and how you can like craft stuff for your house. And I was just like, what was that opening? What is happening? So that was weird. And I also,
do you think there's a payoff to that?
This is exactly why I want to play it, but I'm afraid to play it, because what if there isn't? Like, that would be infuriating. It'd be so infuriating.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, that's, you really have to trust the developer that they're going to pay that off, you know?
Yeah. And the thing that actually has me leaning toward maybe not continuing to play it is, you remember like when we played Harvest Moon, like you got to walk up to like the vegetables and pick them out of the ground, and you got to walk up to the rocks and like hit them with the pickaxe. And this game, like every life sim game, has those same mechanics. The collision targets, like where you have to be in relation to a thing to pick it up, is so specific that a lot of my playtime was just like making these little micro adjustments to get the right distance from the thing, or to be on like the right, X and Y axis from the thing. And that I kind of think is unforgivable. Like, the game isn't brand new, right? Like, they could have been tweaking that and making those collision targets bigger for years, right? The game's been out for at least a couple of years. So that if something makes me not play it, it's that interaction being clunky and terrible, not because I'm overly terrified about them not paying the story off. The one other game that I've been putting some time into is, I think we talked about ages ago, Vampire Survivors, which is it's an idle game. So you play the entire game with just the thumbstick, or a mouse, I guess, if you're playing on keyboard. And you basically, what you are trying to do is not die. So there's just endless hordes of enemies. And as you kill them, they drop crystals. You get crystals, you gain experience. When you gain a level, then you get like a random improvement from a list of improvements that you could pick from. So it's a rogue light kind of thing, because there's some permanent unlocks, but then there's, how a run goes is really luck based. And I played it when it was new, and I was like, okay, I kind of get this. And then the more time I spent with it, I actually found myself really enjoying picking apart the little systems of like, okay, if I can get these 3 upgrades, then those are like pretty powerful together. But if I try to do this other like stack of upgrades, if I don't get the middle one, I'm really screwed. Like, I have to get like 1, 2, 3 in that order. Otherwise their, synergies don't have Super Saiyan effects, right? So it's just very simple. Like, the systems aren't super complicated. So you can just sort of passively be like, oh yeah, I got the garlic, or oh yeah, I got the knife power up that I like, or oh no, I got the one that sucks and I don't like, right? So it's kind of got that Gungeon, like what's in the chest sort of vibe. Yep. Which is fun, because since you literally all you can do is control your direction on the screen, all of the weapons fire automatically on a cooldown timer. So it's really low like effort in your dexterity, but you do have to kind of think about like, okay, how am I going to chain my upgrades together? How am I going to strategically route around the screen so that I can like circle back to pick up all the experience crystals? It's actually a decently fun little game, and has weirdly spawned like an entire copycat genre. It's exhausting to already hear people talking about Vampire Survivors likes. But anyway,
it's clunky.
It is fun. And in the original version of the game, it's not good. In the original version of the game, they had a 30-minute time limit. So when you hit 30 minutes as a way to like force you to reset the run, death, like all the monsters die, and then death comes flying in at 1,000,000 miles an hour, just instantly kills you. And I had my first 30-minute run the other day where I actually captured, I'll post it into the show notes, which you can find. I didn't say this at the top, at nogog.show. There, short URL. I'll put the little video in there, because once you have like 20 or 30 upgrades, the amount of noise on the screen is bananas. Like, just absolute visual nonsense. And now, like, you can play like an endless mode where you can, I guess, go beyond 30 minutes, or you can defeat death if you have certain upgrades or something. But part of me was just like, no, this is a good place to stop this. Not because it's too visually noisy, but because the systems are now interacting in such complicated ways that you don't feel like you're making real decisions anymore. Either your early decisions have paid off and you're invincible, or your early decisions did not pay off, and nothing you can do at this point will matter because the monsters are so strong. So having a maximum run length, I actually think is kind of a cool design choice for a roguelite. I don't know how common that is, but I sort of like it.
No, I agree, because actually that's something that and this dovetails nicely into my stuff. It with D&D, where like back in 3.5 they had the epic levels handbook where you could get all the way up to level 40, 60, I don't know, forever, right?
Yeah, super high.
Went super high, right? But D&D 5th edition was like level 20. That's it. That's as high as you go, And like you said, by that point, you've either created a character that's invincible between your items and buffs and all this sort of stuff, or you've created a mediocre character, or you've created a garbage character that can't survive anything, right? But it's like, no, level 20. That's what, and the same thing with like ability scores. Ability scores used to be able to go up as high as possible. Now it's like, no, it can only go up to 20, 24 in some extreme cases. Gods have a 30 strength, so that's what we're doing. So I kind of like that, upper threshold. One other quick note. In your notes, you forgot to put a comma between Celeste Classic and Vampire Survivors.
No, the game that I played was Celeste Classic, Vampire Survivors.
And I was interested for that one. That's why you said, I've been playing Celeste Classic. I was like, yeah, tell me more about that. And I was like, this doesn't, I don't know, man, where are the vampires at? And then you said the next thing. I was like, oh, okay, there needs to be a comma there. It does a lot of heavy lifting.
Punctuation matters.
What have I been playing? So two things. One is I've been playing. I've not been playing a lot of D&D. I have been writing a lot of D&D in preparation for your visit to me. I have been making a whole city, and I am 5 districts out of 10 districts down, which means that I got to start making new life choices in order to get those other 5 districts made, or just be okay with some of them being under construction when you get here. I say all that to say that I am just enjoying writing the mess out of that, man, because like it's just differences in kind, every time I'm like, oh, okay, so here's like kind of a fun adventure thread, but how could I make it more interesting? For example, one of them that I came up with just the other day that I'm really excited about is and again, you may never find it, right? But is that there's a person at a college and they need you to be a research assistant, right? And so the way that I'm setting this up is you have 7 days to do things, right? So you can spend up to 7 days, up to the whole week, just working on this one mission by preparing yourself by going to the library and reading up. But the thing is that as you assist her, if too many people screw up the experiment goes sideways, right? But that's all up to you. Do you want to spend 5 days at the library researching and buffing out your ability to help? Or do you just want to shoot from the hip and see how it goes, So I'm really enjoying all that. The reason why I mention it is because my son, he and I were playing Pokemon card game, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, hey, I've got to go do another thing. And I came back and there's energy everywhere, right? Too much energy. I'm like, unless you've been playing this for longer than I know you've been playing it, it's impossible for you to have that much energy out. So that looks like a lot of energy, dude. And he goes, oh yeah, like, cause he's playing with Invisible Teddy, and he goes, yeah, I changed the rules a little bit when I'm playing with Invisible Teddy. I'm like, dude, you got to play by the rules. And then I took a step back and realized that I'm clutching all of the D&D rules to make this new game that I want to play with you guys. I'm like, I think I might be the problem here, actually.
Teddy, where did you learn this behavior? From you, Dad. I learned it from watching you.
Exactly. So I learned something, because when Megan mentioned that, I was like, yeah, I think that's probably me. And the funny thing is, I said, like, because I have a tendency to make up my own rules, and I started to link it to the D&D thing, and she said, oh, like that card game you made? I was like, yes, that too.
Also that one.
Like, this is becoming increasingly damning that this is my fault.
Well, yes, but there's the progress arc, right? Like, if you are going to become a jazz musician, you don't start with jazz. You start with like 4/4 regular, like quarter notes on the beat only, right? No unusual rhythms. You have to learn scales and stuff. And then you learn how to break all those rules, when to break them, when not to break them. But none of that matters to a child. So, they're just like, I like jazz. I want to play jazz.
Well, and also too, like he's definitely still in the phase of his journey of the numbers going higher is awesome, right? So at one point he was breaking the rules of the game. He's like, look, I got all of these items and now I have a +10 to attack when normally you have like a +2, It's like, isn't that awesome? I'm like, yes, this is the extreme of the game. This is as far as the game can be pushed. Nothing can touch you. You are invincible. You play it, but
yeah, you did it.
No stakes, like.
When I had a similar experience where I was at a local community basketball court with my 7-year-old, and the hoop was lower for like children, but like older children. And so she couldn't take like a normal shot. So I was like, okay, stand here, like, do it underhand like this. And then she like it was just flying wild. And I was like, oh, you don't know, like you need to aim at that square. Like, see the square on the back? You're not trying to get it into the bucket. You're trying to hit the square. And then it will bounce off the square into the bucket. And she sometimes gets frustrated with stuff and then just doesn't want to do it, right? She gets embarrassed like a lot of little kids do. But man, for whatever reason, she stuck with that for about 10 minutes. And when she finally sank a basket, it's the happiest she's ever been. And I was like, right, if I had like picked her up on my shoulder and like let her do like an easy layup, she would have been like, yay, I made one, and then forgotten about it forever. But for like 2 days, she talked about sinking that bucket on her own because she did. And I had, a similar moment to like what you were talking about in the beginning of the show, which is like, I'm a good parent. I'm good. I did the right thing. I am a great parent and everyone should praise me.
Well, one thing that I think that is both of our parenting styles and a little bit different than our parents' parenting style in general is that when Teddy wants to beat me at something, he can beat me, like I'm not saying that like he can try, like I'm not going to dumb it down. I'm not going to play not as hard. I'm not going to do any of that. He can beat me when he beats me, So like we were playing Trouble the other day and I handily beat him twice. And he's like, oh man, Dad, you're so lucky. And I'm like, luck has nothing to do with it, buddy. It's strategy. And he was like, strategy? I'm like, yeah, look at what I'm doing. And I explained it to him. And he was like, I think I get it. And then it was funny because I got a text from my wife the next day where he goes, Teddy is destroying me in Trouble. And I was like, is he using my strategy? She's like, I think he is. And I'm like, yeah,
yes, the wit maneuver.
I was like, no, you got to keep these pieces back. These are your strikers. And then you got to keep these are your forwards. And I was just like making up names for it, and
I'm imagining like years from now, him across from the table from somebody and them being like, the wit opening. I see this isn't the first time you've ever been in trouble.
And it just like the Borderlands like smash, to like
the action bars.
The other game I've been playing at your recommendation has been Star Trek Resurgence. And one of the things I kind of mentioned at the beginning of the show to you is really, so far I'm enjoying the game. Terrible polish, just the worst, and especially because most of the story is about your interpersonal interactions, like having that lack of polish. I'm really glad that you recommended it to me because I would have dropped it like it's hot in the first 15 minutes and said, this game is trash. Nobody cares. Right. It is way more though. Before I bought it, I looked at the recommendations and it said other games you might like would be Telltale's The Borderlands and stuff like that. I was like, okay, no, that's helpful. I know what I'm getting into. And so there were two things that happened in the game where I was like, no, they get it. I'm into this. All right, we're cool. Let's do this. Which is that every time they'll give you 3 choices of like stuff you can say, right? And I promised myself I'm like, I'm going to play this first playthrough as me. Like what would I, George the Commander, and I, George the Petty Officer, do, right? So, and there were some times where I was like, I think the game wants me to say this, but that's not what I would do. So at one point, I'm sitting down with Spock, right? And so every time you do something that the people like, their face shows up and it's just a little green, right? Say like, hey,
you don't get the Fallout. Everyone liked that.
Right. No, you get like you get their picture and it turns green, or a picture and it turns white means it did not impact them at all, right? Like it didn't positively or negatively, right? Like they made note of it, right? And then red is you upset them, right? And most of my decisions were mostly green, right? And I was like, that's because I'm a good commander, like I know how to win friends, influence people. And then Ambassador Spock showed up on the ship, right? And so you're the commander, you're the second in command, you're not the captain, right? So I'm in the meeting with my boss, right, the captain, and all of the bridge crew and Spock, and he's like just laying on like here's everything that's going down, all this sort of stuff. And I was like, here's what I think about it, like I was given 3 options, and I picked the one. I'm like, this is what I would say. And Spock showed up, and it was white, and I was like, all right, no, that's fair. Maybe he wanted, because I was like, it's between these two, but this one, he wanted the other one. Okay, that's fine. And then another thing to say, and I said another thing, and Spock showed up as white, and I was like, and so you can open up a menu and see exactly what they think of you. And said, Spock noted this, and Spock noted that, and I said, that fucking Vulcan is never gonna like me. You know what? Because he's an emotionless turd, and he has no feelings.
This is his fault.
But I appreciated that because he doesn't like or dislike me because he's Vulcan. He's just making note of my capabilities. And I'm like, I like that. I had the emotional reaction they wanted me to have, which is, how do I get you to like me, Spock?
Yeah. A human interacting with Vulcan would be very frustrating.
Yeah, because it's like, can you at least, are we on the same page? Are we cool? It's like, I have no idea why we would need to be cool or uncool. I simply am noting your ability to do your job. You seem to be able to do it. So we're cool then, right? Again, it's like, oh God. So that was a weird, like, enjoyable moment to where I was like, no, this is cool. One of the other ones where apparently I'm not a great second in command because I pissed off the captain. Basically, a thing, he puts you in command of the ship because you're at a starbase, right? So he goes on to the starbase to go get a person. So you're in command, right? And things go sideways, right? And so basically they're like, protocol is to do thing A, but there are mitigating circumstances and a secondary option, right? So the captain gets on the horn with you. Oh, mild spoilers for the first 15 minutes of this game. Captain gets on the horn with you and says, disengage the docking clamps, right? And then they're like, but Captain, if we do this super scientific thing, it could also work. And I said, do the scientific thing. And the reason why is, in my mind, is I was like, he doesn't have all of the information. He's giving me an order to do a thing, but he's not here. He doesn't have all the information to make the correct decision. So I'm going to make the correct decision. That's what he pays me for, right? And so I did that, and all of the crew lit up in green, and he lit up in red. And I was like, uh-oh, he's a mad. And so it ends up being the correct decision. Like I did, like nobody died, everybody comes back unharmed, right? And so he comes back onto the bridge and he's like, report. And they're like, blah, 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 blah. And he goes, Commander, in my ready room. I'm like, oh no.
Oh. Does everybody on the bridge go, ooh,
you're in trouble. So I get pulled into his ready room and he says, you directly disobeyed my command. And the thing that I was really happy about is I was given 3 options of things to say. And one of them was, you didn't have all of the information that you needed to make a good decision.
That's
and I was
good.
like, yeah,
that's good.
That is why. Right. And I was like, yeah, good. And so I selected that one, and it was just lit him up in red again. He did not like that. And so when I hit the pause screen and selected this thing, it said he was upset about your insubordination with his direct order and your continued insubordination. And I was like, no, I stand by the decision. I feel like I made the right call. And so then as we're talking back and forth, he says, like, my reputation already took a hit with this other thing. And now with you not obeying my orders, word's going to get around. I'm like, And so now we're getting to the real reason why you're upset with me. And one of the options that I had that also upset him, because I didn't pick it, was, I'm sorry, it won't happen again. And I didn't pick that because I'm not sorry. I feel like I made the right call. And so I'm getting along with a lot of people on the ship, not the captain, but I feel like I'm making the right decisions, and so it felt like a management problem, like a good Star Trek game should be, where it's like, make an interesting decision, And I was like, yeah, this is good. So I really hope they remaster the game because the polish is absolutely terrible, but it's fun otherwise.
Well, you have me curious now because forgot that it was a Telltale game. And this kind of game, like this is, I think literally all they do is they make narrative driven character interaction story games set in other people's universes, right? Like they are incredible chefs, but they have no access to raw ingredients. So they like go and they're like, hey, I see you have some chicken and this other person has some carrots and I'm going to put those together into the most delicious dish you've ever had. But like somehow they don't have, like, as far as I know, any of their own properties, or at least none of the games they're famous for are their own properties. Right. And what that makes me curious about is I wonder if what you are perceiving as because I haven't played the game, right? And I've actually only played one of their games and it was years ago, but I wonder if what you're perceiving as a lack of polish is the like weird sort of animated kind of like art style that they do, because all of the clips of their games that I've ever seen all have a similar animated kind of, it's a little blocky, almost like they're going for more of an art house look than. No, it's not that.
No, it's not that. Because I know, like, if you're comparing it to the Telltale's The Walking Dead, right?
Yeah, and they did Back to the Future, which was very cartoony, even though those are real people, right?
No. This looks like they took stock Unreal Engine animations and threw on there. You know, like they look like real people. Too bad. Yeah. Like I would have preferred it to have like, you know, that art house feel. Because that I would have, but they really got the facial emotions right, you know, as opposed to, you know, it looks like a Call of Duty, you know, it doesn't look like Borderlands, it looks like Call of Duty, you know? Yeah. So, again, you know, it's not to the point where you just kind of have to acknowledge it and then say, I am going to ignore this, you know, because, there are tons of times when, you know, at one point you're walking into an area and you're hurt and I'm like, that looks awful, but don't think about that. Just think that person's hurt, you know, like that's, you know, so don't let it pull you out of the moment, you know, kind of a thing. So
this is, God, I don't remember the last time I made like a targeted recommendation to you. I was like, you should play this specific game. Right. Cause I know I've said stuff like, oh yeah, you might like this, or this does some interesting things, but yeah, the one article that I sent you, I think it was Polygon, maybe, whatever. Mm-hmm. That I was reading through that, and they just kept drilling on like a Star Trek game that understands what Star Trek is actually about, and I was like, that could be like that statement could mean so many things, but because I am one of the kinds of jerks who says that, I know what someone probably means when they say that, right? It's not Voyager, it's not Enterprise, it's not Discovery, right? It's the TNG, like I was the right age at this time in history, and you know, oh Captain, my Captain, that's what Star Trek is. Even though there is now more not TNG than TNG by like 2 or 3 fold, but for us and for people I think like us, like that is correct Star Trek, and everything else is attempting to emulate it. Which I feel bad about because like a lot of the newer stuff is not attempting to emulate that, but I am still holding it to that standard.
Well, I think that to me, Star Trek TNG is, if you say which is the best science fiction Star Trek, it's TNG. You know, then other Star Treks do other things and scratch other itches. You know, but if you because like I love Deep Space Nine, it's the West Wing in space. You know, it's fun if that's what you're into, you know, and it does do some sciencey fiction-y stuff, you know. Voyager is its own thing, and as they've gone on, it's less science fiction and more science fantasy. Now it's Grand Theft Auto in space, or you know, the Fast and the Furious in space, right? You know,
Fast and the Furious did go to space.
Yeah, exactly. And so. And so that's fine if that's what you're looking for. If you know, like if you want to see this amazing thing where, you know, the Enterprise like pulls up through a nebula and it's like dun 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 dun, like that feels amazing and it's awesome, but it's not science fiction. It's just action movie, and that's okay. But if I'm looking to scratch the itch of, and that's why every single time Teddy says, why don't we watch some Star Trek? I'm like, yeah, let's watch some Star Trek, you know? And I pick like one of the ones that I liked as a kid, you know? We just did the one recently where the Enterprise is developing emergent sentience. It's a good episode. Talks about emergence. Talks about well, and because at one point they're like, shut it all down, and Picard's like, this is a life form now, right? Like, should we do that? And I'll pause and be like, what do you think, Teddy? He goes like, I don't know, man. It's like, but you're thinking about it, and that's the important bit.
Yeah, well, and good that he didn't immediately jump to either answer, right?
Yeah.
No, it's definitely a life form, and no, it's definitely not a life form. It's like, well, you should probably side with the risk of a life form, right? Because like that's where the higher risk is. So you would want to lean that way. But it's good that you didn't just jump to like a gut response, because that's also not good.
Right. And that's the thing is it's like, okay, well, because and the thing that they do such a great job setting it up, and this is where I think that this game will shine, I'm hoping, is it's like, okay, so the decision is it's like, okay, decision A, terminate it, right? In which case, yeah, you might be killing something new and unique in the universe, right? And as I believe Picard says, is their job is to seek out new life and new civilizations, and this is it. Like this is potentially a new life form, right? But it is putting the ship at risk, which means that you are risking the lives of 1,000 actual life forms that you know for sure is a life form in order to potentially save this emergent life form. Now, the risk is low, but it's non-zero, so it's just like juggle all of that, And again, like that's the thing is that like there is the decision that Picard and the crew make, but there's not necessarily a definitive right decision. And that to me is where Star Trek is, where it's like, where good science fiction is, where they say, here's a question. All right, here's what we're going to do. But what would you do? And you're like, I don't know. Let me think on it, Yeah. Anyway, so it seems to be scratching that same itch so far. So we'll see. I think you would actually like it too, because it reminded me a lot of Phoenix Wright.
Ooh, yeah.
And the fact that it's just like, look, man, you're there to do a couple of things, but the playing the video game part is not the most important part. You are kind of reading a book mostly.
Yeah. Is it voice acted at all, or is it mostly reading?
It is voice acted. Yeah.
Okay. I just opened a new tab to leave myself a note, and when you search for Star Trek Resurgence on DuckDuckGo, one of the articles that it highlights has the title, Star Trek Resurgence is the best of 90s Trek with the worst of 90s gaming. And that's, I think that's a very pithy, editor-approved summary of what you just said.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. It is all voice acting, and I will say the voice acting is good. The visuals behind the voice acting are tragic, but the voice acting itself is good.
Do you have how much time do you think you've put into it so far? Like, are you still like an hour in, or like several?
I'm at least 4 hours in.
Do you have is there like one overarching, we have to stop the Borg style problem, or is this more just like the continuing adventures of this crew?
It seems like that there's one, we have to stop the Borg. It seems like that, and the interesting thing is that it seems like the thing you have to do is negotiate like a trade dispute kind of a thing, So like you are on a diplomatic mission, like that's the thing that you're there to do, Now I don't know like where they're going to go with that, but that's what Ambassador Spock is there to like. He's the ambassador, and he's like, but I need your help, and here's what we need to do, kind of a thing. But it seems that that's and again, when I saw that, I was like, yeah, man, because it's not all fight the Borg. If it was fight the Borg, then this has bad controls and bad this and bad that. But
it's not the engine for fighting the Borg.
And actually, one of the other things that they have is because there's a lot of times when they say like hit R2 to do a thing, and like there's a lot of quick time moments. You can turn that off.
Nice. Yeah. So they're definitely saying like there will be some action things, maybe, but definitely story things. Like the story things are the non-negotiable, right? The thinky, again, Star Trek-y part, and then the other action-y things, like if you can straight up disable them, then that's a for people who care.
Yeah, like because like literally at one point I missed the thing and I died, and it said like, would you like to try again, or would you like to try again in story mode where none of it matters, And I'm like, I'm gonna try again. I'm not frustrated with this yet, but I like that I can just stop this if I don't like it, Yeah,
that's I think that kind of thing gives me visual novel kind of vibes, right? Because it's like, no, the point is to get through the story. Like the objective is there is a story and we wrote it and we would like you to hear it. And I'm like as an old school JRPG player, like I'm totally fine with that. Like I don't need everything to be an open world, full freedom, like but what I hate is games that are clearly doing one, but the other is the one that's popular in marketing at that time, so they pretend they're the other one. It's like, no, just be what you are.
Well, and I think that this one is not only the, it's not The Last of Us in the sense that like we are here to tell a story. I think it's The Last of Us if it was a choose your own adventure, Yeah.
So like I guess some visual novels have that. You have some sway on the story style, but it's usually within like boundaries, so like you may walk closer to one side of the hall than the other, but you're still in a hallway.
Yeah, I think the way I look at it is it's like, I think I agree with you where they say we're here to tell a story. The only tweak I would make is we're here to tell 5 stories and you get to pick which one we're telling, But it's like, because I was just kind of, as the crew was like, yeah, we're on board with you. And as the captain was like, no, I don't like this. I'm like, this could definitely lead to a mutiny-like situation where the crew's behind me. Because the captain is making decisions that are based off of his ego, which is not good leadership, I feel that in the story that they're telling that the captain was a good leader at one point, and now recently some things have happened that have like shaken him and he's not handling it well. But I have to deal with it because I'm second in command, So again, like just kind of well made. What's your I've got a big discussion topic, but what's yours?
I just wanted to gush a little bit about the Steam Deck, honestly.
Go for it.
Because so I think I may have said this to you or said this on another episode, but I've had a Switch since pretty early on. I think maybe like the first year I got one, and my hands are like, they're big for my height, but I am short, right? So like my hands are not huge on the scale of hands, and I find the Switch uncomfortably small to hold in handheld mode. And that is like one of the main things I was excited to get out of it, because when I saw in the original like ads where you could literally pick it, like the game is on your TV screen and you pick it up off the dock and just immediately continue what you were doing. Because I work in technology, right? I've been in technology for my whole career. And I just went, no, it can't be that fast. And it is. It is actually that fast. Like you could be playing a race of Mario Kart and pick the Switch right up off the deck or off the little dock that it sits in, and the game just continues playing, and now it's on the small screen instead of your television. Like it's amazing. It's really, really cool. The problem is I can only play with it in that super cool, super portable mode for like 30 minutes, and then my hands are friggin' killing me. And they make custom like Joy-Cons that you can put on that are more like big kind of ergonomic handles. But then you can't use a regular Switch traveling case. You have to use a special one, or you have to take the handles off and carry them separately. And it adds little additional wrinkles that are very frustrating, right? To the point where I was like, okay, I basically play this Switch in 2 ways. As a regular console with a Pro controller sitting on my couch, in which case none of that mobility stuff matters. Or if I am playing a game that is a Switch exclusive, so I have to play it on the Switch, and my only window to play it is when I'm going to be away from a TV, then I'm playing it like begrudgingly, and that's not great, right? Like I don't want to say like I hate reading this book because I just have to get to the end of the book. So my Switch unfortunately has been relegated to games I cannot play anywhere else. Like I love a Mario, I love a Zelda, they're Nintendo. I played the like Metro Dread when that came out, and I loved it to death. But like those games are as tethered to the wall for me personally as my PS5 or my gaming PC. So I'm like losing all of the things that makes the Switch. And that was very frustrating. When the Steam Deck got announced, I saw pictures of it and like renderings with measurements on it and like how much bigger it was. And I was like, this thing is massive. This is like stupidly massive. Who would want to carry this giant thing around? And then it was way on back order. Then slowly I started knowing people who had them, and they were like, not as big as you think, man. And all that extra space is worth it because it's hollow inside. So it's not bigger and heavier. It's bigger for ergonomics, right? So that it sits in your palm. You're not like pinching it with your fingers. If I was a kid, a Switch would sit in my palms, but I'm not. So I'm like pinching it with my fingers and my thumbs. And it's just like, oh yeah, Okay, so these are people like I trust because they play a lot of games and they play a lot of games on the go. So like if they're saying the ergonomics are good, like that sounds kind of good. And then I found out that it came into like normal rotation where it just anybody could just order it whenever and they would ship it within like a week or two, and it was not on like months of delay back order, right? Because the thing was originally announced like I think in the last 6 months of COVID lockdown. So like all the supply chain stuff was all messed up, right?
Right.
And so I finally was complaining. I was like, man, I just like I have PC games, I have, classic games, games I want to play that I can't get to because I'm just not always in a place where I can sit down in front of my monitor or in front of the television and pick up a controller that is plugged into a console and like have that. I want that experience. It's just not my life right now. And so for like 2 days, I was just like, oh, maybe because like there's this program I do where I can like earn gift cards. And so maybe like I'll save up that gift card money. And then I was like, oh, maybe I already have like a few dollars in there. And I went and looked, and because I hadn't messed with it in a while, I already had like 3/4 of the money I needed to pay for it because it's just been building up over like months and months and months. I was like, okay, whatever. I'm just gonna do it. I'm just gonna buy it right now. So I ordered it. It comes with a traveling case, which is nice because it's perfectly fit for it and everything. It's got the ergonomics are exactly what I was hoping they would be. It feels great in my hand. I can play it I haven't been able to play for more than like an hour and a half, but like I could, right? I could play for that long. And then when I put it down, my hands are not friggin' aching from pinching in like a weird claw grip thing. And I think it's a 7-inch screen or an 8-inch screen. It's bigger than the Switch, but it's a really nice screen and you're holding it in your hand. So like Final Fantasy 14, which is an incredibly UI dense, it's an MMO, right? There's a billion things on screen. I can play that game on the Switch Deck. It runs serviceably well. I can see what I need to see to like play the game. I played all the games actually that I talked about. I played all of those on the Switch Deck over the last, I think, week and a half since we recorded. It's just really nice to be able to say, I have 20 minutes, like, and I'm not ignoring something else, right? It's not like my child is taking their first steps right next to me and I'm like, haha, but I have a Steam Deck, right? It's like, I had to take my kid to a swimming lesson last week. It's like, I'm just sitting in the lobby while they're in like an enclosed room in the little like wave pool thing. So like, I can't help. I'm not involved. Like I have nothing to do. I would just be on my phone or reading a book or something, but I have a Steam Deck. So I got to play video games for 30 minutes. It was great. I loved it. Like, it's like, I'm now getting the joy that I didn't get as a kid because I didn't have a Game Boy, where it's like, I'm away from my Super Nintendo, but I can still play Mario, right? Like this is that exact kind of vibe. And the nice side effect for me is normally when you get a new console, it's like, oh, well, I just got a PS5 or Switch or an Xbox or whatever. Now I have to buy games for it. But because this thing is just a little PC, I have a lot of games that can be played on PC, literally hundreds and hundreds of them, because I religiously get the free games that like Steam and Epic give away every week. I bought Humble Bundles and stuff over the years. So, I mean, I now like just by sheer volume having to adopt your position of I need to be indifferent to my backlog, because now that I actually have access to my backlog, I'm never going to tackle it. Like it's just way too massive. But it's nice because like several of the games that I played over the last couple of weeks, I would never block out time to sit down and play those games. But now that I can play them for 10 or 15 minutes, when I actually have that 10 or 15 minutes and then decide, do I want to continue to invest in this? Like, this is exactly what I want. This is slotting in. Like I saw, a hole and I had like a piece that I thought, I was like, I think this will just about fit in there. And it's like a perfect snug fit. Like the whole thing is papered over and it looks like there was never any damage there. Like my video game life is repaired.
So how does it handle, because it's like a video game console, but it's made for games that are for the computer, yes?
Yes.
Okay, so like how does it handle the fact that you're not using WASD and all that, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so this is where I actually learned some fascinating things about how PC video games work that I did not know before, because I just never had a reason to like dig into it. So Steam, part of the benefit of buying games through Steam is that Steam takes some of the things you do and puts them in a database somewhere so that when someone else tries to do the thing you're doing, they already have data for that. So what I mean by that is if you sit down at your PC and somehow you were the first person to ever plug your PS5 in, because it's a USB-C controller, so you plug the PS5 controller into your PC and it says, hey, we don't know what the hell that thing is. Where are the buttons? And you say, oh, well, here's the D-pad and here are the thumbsticks and here's the shoulder buttons. Now, next week, when I plug my PS5 controller in, it goes, oh, hey, here's the buttons. Go ahead and just start playing your game. Have a good time. Right. And like, so because this has like a compatibility layer, there are like most modern PC games expect you to play with a controller because modern PCs have had controller support for a while, officially and unofficially through certain channels. But like it's been normal for a long time. So not only can you play with the built-in controls, but like I could pair my PS5 controller to the Steam Deck and sit it on the table and then play with it separately. Or you can actually, it has a little dock like the Switch, so you can use an external monitor and a keyboard and mouse and stuff if you want to. They've done some clever things where like on the front of it, under the thumbsticks, there are these two little black squares, and those are actually virtual mice. So if you need to like pick something from a menu and for whatever reason that menu doesn't respond to like the D-pad, you can actually run your thumb and it will move a cursor on screen, and then you hit one of the shoulder buttons to do left click and the other shoulder button to do right click. So there's a key combination that'll bring up a little on-screen keyboard so you can enter text when you have to. So most games are going to support controllers because controller support has been an expectation for a long time. But even for the ones that are just like, no, you have to use a keyboard and mouse, it will still work with an external keyboard and mouse, and it has the virtual internal keyboard and mouse. So it's incredibly well thought out.
And so follow-up question, like let's say that you wanted to loan me your Steam Deck and I wanted to play like a game I owned on it. I assume it supports that pretty well.
That's a good question. I actually don't know how it handles multi-user. My guess would be it handles it fine. And the only reason I would assume that is because Steam, like on a PC, like if you just install Steam on Windows, that handles multiple users really well. So kind of like on a PlayStation, like I can log into your PlayStation and then you can borrow games from my library. Steam basically has that exact same model. In fact, I think they probably had it first. So you can log into actually my friend's Steam account is logged in on my PC and I'm logged in on hers. So like I have access to her games, she has access to my games, right? So I assume it would probably work fine where I could say like, oh, just here it is, log into it with your Steam account, and then you'll be able to see all of my games and all of your games.
Here's what we're going to do. When you come to visit me, you're going to bring that, and I am going to, regardless of whether or not I purchase a Steam Deck, buy Darkest Dungeon 2, and we're going to see how well this works on your Steam Deck.
Done. I cannot wait to report back on that.
Yeah, and then after you go, we'll report back on the episode. Yes. Yeah. That's where all of those leading questions were going.
Yeah. There's in like product management, there's this theory of like jobs to be done where it's like, oh, nobody buys nails because they want to put holes in the wall. They buy a hammer and nails because they want to like hang a picture of their grandchildren, right? So the job to be done of a hammer is hang a picture of my grandchild, right? And so like you were just doing a jobs to be done interview for Darkest Dungeon. Like
yeah, I want to know if this will play Darkest.
Yeah, will this tool allow me to play Darkest Dungeon 2? If not, then this is not the right tool for the job.
Right. Well, and that's the thing is that like there are a bunch of games like where somebody will say like, oh, you should check this out, or oh, try this, and I'm like, okay, cool. Oh, it's for PC only, and I do have a PC, a gaming PC that would play that, but that's not what I use it for, you know. So I'm like, oh man, I gotta go, and it just seems so dumb, but it's like I gotta go upstairs, unplug the thing, bring it downstairs, plug the controller in, get it all set up, you know, and that whole process takes like 5 or 10 minutes. But I can literally pick up my PlayStation remote, press the PlayStation button, and I'm playing video games right now, you know? And so it just that extra little threshold is just, it's a lot sometimes, you know? So like if I had the Steam Deck downstairs, especially if I can, you know, pair the PS, you know, whatever remote to it and plug it into the TV, so I could say like, okay, this controller is the Steam Deck controller. And then like when I want to play Darkest Dungeon 2, I just pick up a different controller and now I'm playing it. I'm way more likely to play those games. So yeah, no, that's Yeah. I'm
No, dude,
exciting.
You for some people, I would say one of the drawbacks to it is not a super powerful PC. So if you want to play, Call of Bro Duty 15 on 4K settings at 120 frames per second, this is not the machine for that, right? It's not going to render photorealistic people at super high frame rates where there's a million billion particle effects on screen, because that's not what it's for, right? If you want to play that game, you sit down at your PS5 or your powerful gaming PC or whatever. But, both of us, I think, are in similar positions where it's like we have a whole life of things going on. So a lot of times we don't get around to games when they're brand ass new, right? So by most of the games I'm playing at one point were physically demanding on the hardware, right? Like Final Fantasy 14 10 years ago, I'm sure required a fairly powerful PC. The game is 10 years old now, and they've done like graphical improvements and stuff, so it is a little bit beefier than it was in 2013. But the Steam Deck runs it no sweat, like no big deal, right? And then if you sit down and you're like, oh, I want to play, and you pick up a PS5 controller that's paired to it all the time, that's like the default paired controller for the Steam Deck, and then your kids are like, hey, we want to come and sit with dad on the couch and color while he's playing, and you're like, yeah, I don't want them watching this. You just pick the Steam Deck off the dock and just play it in handheld mode, and then your kids can sit there and color, and it's like, okay, now mom can watch TV and the kids can color, and you can just keep doing what you're doing. And like it's not perfect, right? No piece of hardware is perfect, but for, like I said, for the hole in my life that it needed to fill, the fit is just so good.
Yeah, because that's the thing, is that because I thought about a Steam Deck again for a number of different things, but like I was like, yeah, there's nothing that I'm like really jonesing to play on the computer. There's some stuff where occasionally they're like, hey, you should play this. I'm like, oh, I would, whatever. I'll see if it comes out on the PlayStation. But Darkest Dungeon 2, I'm like, when is that coming to the PlayStation? Because I need it. Yeah. And especially because, unfortunately, an article popped up on my thing and said like, hey, Darkest Dungeon 2. And I was like, for the PlayStation? And I scrolled through and I was like, no, not for the PlayStation. So then I Googled, hey, PlayStation, when are you going to get this? And they're like, yeah, we don't really know. And I was like, okay, that's cool. But now my feed is like, what do you think the 3 best feats are for this thing? And what do you think this? And I'm like, I want to play it, okay? Like I'm
Shut
with
up and
you.
Take my money.
It just put it on the PlayStation. But if this does that, then for whatever was it, like $500, something like that?
There's 3 models. The base model I would not recommend. The middle model is $6. Or no, it's $549.
Yeah. So I mean, like, again, it's a PlayStation, right?
Yeah.
So that's a substantial chunk of money, but one where I could say like, it's my birthday, or whatever, like this is a thing that I want.
I do have one other thing I will mention about it. Just a casual thing I want to just say is it is a fact, right? I don't want to make a big deal out of it, but I've been told by terrible people who are bad and do bad things with the internet that it is also an incredibly powerful emulation machine, up to and including even fairly recent consoles. So if you're a bad person who would do something like buy a video game legitimately and then back it up because, goddamn it, you own it and you're allowed to do things like that, and I don't care what the law says, this could theoretically facilitate those kinds of behaviors that I wouldn't encourage, but have absolutely participated in and strongly encourage. So,
yeah,
so that's a thing.
So that
too.
being said, is if I were to emulate it, and then hypothetically, let's say I wanted to talk about it, but with a friend, but in a forum where other people could hear us talk about it, right, I could use that to then gain information that I could then use to have an educated discussion that we could then like record.
Yes.
And
again, strictly in theory. We've never tested this.
No, absolutely not. NoGog.com. So
NoGog.show.
Okay, sorry. So the question that I had is, this is for video games and for movies. But we can focus it on video games.
You can watch movies on Steam Deck. Oh, sorry, are we on to something different now? Oh.
Yeah, what are we doing? Oh my God, I'm alive and I'm doing a podcast, it seems like. So a lot of media nowadays, video games as well, that are narratively driven, seem to like be focused on, what's the twist? Like what's the big surprise, right? And so the reason why I'm asking this is it seems like if somebody says, "Oh, well, that plot was predictable," and it's like, okay, is that inherently bad that you were able to predict the plot? But the reason why I ask is because what I said earlier is when I said, seems like the crew is really liking what I'm laying down, and it seems like the captain's really hating what I'm laying down. So is this going to come to a head where like the crew is like, where like the captain throws me in the brig or whatever, and then the crew's like, no, man, we need you to lead because you're not going to get us all killed, right? So if that were to happen, I thought about it and I was like, if that were to happen, I would be like, oh, I saw that coming, but I wouldn't be upset or frustrated or disappointed because I'm excited to see how they get there and how it resolves, right? But I feel like a lot of people would be like, oh, well, that was predictable. I could tell from the start that there was going to be a mutiny, right? So is it bad to be predictable?
Yeah, I think there's some interesting facets to this. One is, I think there's a confirmation bias of the kind of person who complains that something was predictable is just more likely to, you're more likely to encounter them than someone who's just like, oh, I thought that had a good story. I enjoyed it, right? So if you watch something that's like a super bog standard hero's journey, right? Thousands of years old concept, most people would not remark on like, oh, it was a bog standard hero's journey. And I love those because that's just such a part of how humans tell stories that it is not even worth remarking on, except for the smartasses who have to be like, I'm so much, I don't even own a TV. I don't even listen to popular music, right? It's that kind of, and because a lot of movies and games and you know, popular novels have big twists and sell themselves on like, you'll never see it coming, or like the ending will blow your mind, or it's essentially it came first, but it is the same sort of mentality as clickbait, right? Like, you know, these 5 celebrities, you won't believe what these 5 celebrities look like now. Number 3 will shock you. And it's like, oh man, I gotta know. And then you get in there and one of two things happens. Either you are shocked and they had the effect they wanted, or you guessed which celebrity was going to look terrible. And then you either feel good about that or you don't. But in any of those 3 outcomes, they don't care because they got you to click on the article, right? And so when the fact that like buying the movie or buying the game or clicking on the article is what those people are after, not necessarily satisfaction guaranteed, right? Then that group of, I'm going to go online and complain about this, is not only not a risk to them because they don't care, but it's kind of a benefit because then other people are like, wow, a lot of people are talking about how the twist in the new Super Mario Universe game was not as crazy as they expected. I should go buy that game and see if it's really as mediocre as people are saying. And it's like, what? Now you're just coming up with insane reasons to justify the thing you wanted to do anyway. You want to prove the haters wrong. You want to prove the haters right. You want to like just, I don't know, just do the thing. But I think that's a big part of it, is that there's the outsized number of people you hear from are the whiny people complaining. The other side to it to me is they have done some studies on whether or not spoilers ruin things for people, and not overwhelming, like irrefutable evidence, but the evidence seems to be pointing towards spoilers actually make you enjoy things more, because when you are not obsessively trying to think ahead, you can go full George is the Buddha and just live in the moment. And people are happier when they're living in the moment, right? That's why we have Nirvana. It's like a thing that people would aspire to. So knowing that there's a twist, and even knowing what the twist is, means you're free to stop worrying about what the goddamn twist is. So I don't think you know, it's good to just go around and ruin things for people, but to say that things that are predictable are bad is like kind of scientifically proven to be false.
Well, I think that because, you know, there've actually been areas, games, movies, things like that, where I've actually disengaged because I felt that the twist was going to be predictable, you know, where it's like, oh, they're setting up this thing and it's like, oh, but what's in this black box? What's the mystery? And I'm like, this is what's in the black box. And I think that to me, so I agree with you. And I think that to me, the problem then is it's fine if what's in the black box is like when it pops out of the black box, you're like, whoa, I had no idea that's what it was. Or if what's in the black box pops out and you're like, I knew what that was. But if all the entertainment has going for it is, look, there's a thing in this black box, then you're really banking on whatever pops out of that black box is a surprise, right? You know, like The Sixth Sense, fine movie, but like if not for the I see dead people, like that part, like that twist at the end, most of that movie is unremarkable, you know? Like, so that's the thing. But what was in the black box was really exciting and really cool. So it's worth the 1.5 hour lead in to this like 5-minute payoff, right? And so I don't think that it's about what happens, but again, like if you don't, it's okay to make things predictable, but now you have to like make the movie itself enjoyable, or the video game itself enjoyable, right? So the reason why I was like, I bet this could lead to a mutiny situation, but that didn't bother me is because I'm like, I have no idea how they're going to get there, or who's going to be involved, or what characters are going to be on board or not on board, or like what's going to force this situation. Like all of these are questions that I want answered, right? So even though I may, and again, I may be wrong, right? Even though I may have sussed out like one of the story notes, I'm still interested in all of the notes that lead up to it and all of the notes that come afterwards, as opposed to I have created a stereotypical desaturated steampunk universe where everything is exactly the way you would anticipate it being. And the other thing that I think is important is one of the things that could make something predictable is if characters are behaving predictably. And I thought about that and I'm like, well, I'm not sure that that's inherently a bad thing, because characters that behave unpredictably, unless like that is part of their character, is crappy writing, right? Like we've known each other for a while. You should be able to say like, well, if A, George is going to do B, you know, like literally I just had this with a friend of mine recently where somebody said, I don't know why George is trying to do this thing. He's like, George is trying to do thing A. And he relayed this conversation to me. I'm like, that is exactly what I'm trying to do. Yes. And he goes like, yeah. So you see, like that's, so again, like, but I think the question is, where it becomes problematic is not when characters behave predictably, is when they behave stereotypically. When they become a caricature of themselves, then it becomes tiresome, right? Yeah. When it's just like, you know, so for instance, if, you know, Joey, you know, when he, from Friends, right, if he's put into a situation and it's like, oh, well, you know, knowing everything I know about Joey, he's probably going to, you know, go into the situation and, you know, be upset that his friends, you know, were like behaving poorly and that other people were behaving poorly to them because he's like kind of the heart of the group. So he is going to focus on the emotional aspect of it. Whereas Ross, predictably, would focus on like the intellectual aspect of it. And therein will lie conflict and resolution. But when Joey walks in and goes like, I'm hungry, I want to eat. And it's like, okay, well, fine. Yes, that is the caricature part of that character.
Yeah, you're now a series of catchphrases.
Right. So I think that's when that becomes tiresome. But I think that people a lot of times conflate the two, where it's like, well, this character is just so predictable. And it's like, that's fine if, you know that Tuvok, the Vulcan, is going to do, you know, very logical Vulcan stuff. But when like he behaves exactly the way that he did, you know, where you're like, he is going to not care about any of this other stuff. He is going to do nothing surprising, because he's going to act stereotypically. You know, it's fine for you to say like, given this situation and the fact that Tuvok is like a person, I give like a 75% chance that he's going to do thing A, but a 25% chance he could do thing B, because all people are unpredictable. But when it's like Tuvok behaves in this way 100% all the time, every time, because he's two-dimensional, that's the problem, you know?
Well, and to keep this on Star Trek, because we talked about Star Trek game,
yep.
I've been watching through Star Trek Discovery. I think we talked about it briefly. And it's not good. It's a bad show. But but what has kept me watching it is that all of the actors are good. Some of the actors are phenomenal. And some of the interactions between certain actors are really phenomenal. So even though the scenario they're in is contrived and ridiculous, and like how they got to where they are and what they're trying to accomplish is often contrived and ridiculous, some of the like one-on-one interactions or like, you know, small group interactions are just so good and they're so well performed that I'm like, I don't actually care about them accomplishing any of their goals. But like, I just want her to be happy because she seems like a really good person and she's really trying her best. Right. And
nice.
so like you end up in this weird position where I'm definitely not hate watching it, but if somebody said like, oh, should I watch Star Trek Discovery? I would be like, do you care about the individual character relationships, which is why my wife loves it, because that's what she cares about, right? Or do you care about like the threat to the universe or the threat to the Federation, right? The large scale problem they're dealing with. And if they said large scale problem they're dealing with, I'd be like, no, it's terrible. It involves time travel. It's garbage. Like it's just not. I personally like by the things that I rank like a good story on, like the episode we just watched, they had to have like a Vulcan debate club thing. And I was like, oh, okay. So the main character, Michael, wants to get something from the Vulcans, and they're like, no. And she invokes the right to Vulcan debate club. And then they're very angry about that because like they have to, you know, it's an ancient tradition that they still uphold. So they have to honor it, but they understand what she's doing. And I was like, oh, this is interesting because she's human, but she was raised on Vulcan. So she has like some Vulcan tendencies, like kind of a Spock, like, you know, that split between worlds character. Yep. And then it ends up being a debate between her and the tribunal because she has to convince the whole like quorum, but everyone on the ship is in attendance. And nice. So there's like an audience to this ancient ritual debate club that they know nothing about. And like she has an advocate, but the advocate like openly undermines her in a bid to get her to have an emotional appeal so that she can guarantee that she's speaking honestly, which I don't think Vulcans would find valuable. Like it's the whole thing is completely contrived. But after all of that, at the end, the main character and her advocate, who she has a prior relationship with, they have a conversation that is incredibly genuine and very moving and very well performed. And I was like, we had to sit through 40 minutes of insane bullshit to get to this like 90-second scene that was incredibly satisfying. And that's not an easy to recommend ratio, right? Because like there was all this to do exactly what I think you're saying, to avoid predictability. They were like, well, then there's this crazy thing, and then this character is going to do something no one expected. And it's like, of course it was unexpected. We didn't know anything about this ritual until the beginning of this episode, and you didn't explain anything. You've been explaining it in flight. So saying, whoa, there's a rule you didn't even know about is like, I didn't know about any of the rules. Like none of this is familiar.
When I think that then, you know, so two things. One is that I agree that sometimes you know, character performances can be a you know, like a driver for it. One of the things that I always felt that Voyager kind of lost out on was Jerry Ryan is a fantastic actress, right? And they brought her on to play 7 of 9 and then never did anything really with that character as far as character development to allow her to, you know, be a good actress. So she just had to be like, I am 7 of 9 and I am Borg and I am Data, right? You know,
that's why they probably brought her back in Picard so she could actually like act.
Yeah. But then I remember because I was just kind of like, fine, it's Jerry Ryan. They brought her on, you know, ratings, whatever, right? But then I was watching it and there's one episode where the Doctor downloads himself like into her, you know, Borg stuff, right? So she is now the Doctor in her body. And that was the Doctor. That was the Hollow Doctor. Jerry Ryan is playing him. But I was like, that was perfect. I am so impressed by how much I'm like, that is a 57-year-old man in this 28-year-old woman's body. You know, I was like, 10's across the board. Why aren't you letting her do this more? You know, like you got her walking around, you know, I mean, it would be like having Wolfgang Puck making, you know, like hard boiled eggs. It's like, what are you doing, man? Like let this Ferrari out of the garage. I say all that to say, I think that where I could probably wrap this back to is a lot of the times is the story based off of like an extrinsic reward or an intrinsic reward, which is to say, like, is the entire narrative based off of the extrinsic reward of, I want to find out what's in the box, right? So I'm willing to put up with all of this other BS and nonsense because I want to know what's in the box. I want to know what the monster looks like. I want to know whatever, right? Or is the story genuinely moment to moment enjoyable, you know? And I think it's more difficult to make the moment. It's easy to say like, I came up with a cool thing that I put in a box. Don't you want to know what it is? Doesn't matter what I do for 2 hours as long as there's something cool in the box. And that's just a gamble, right?
It's Lost. It's one. You just described Lost.
Yes, right. One roll of the dice, right? Like you'll either like what's in the box or you won't, you know? Whereas opposed to like The Last of Us, right? Where the thing in the box, the big reveal was that like, oh, this thing will kill Ellie. But like, that's not what the story's about. You know, like the story's about their relationship, and that thing being in the box is just like the final struggle, right? You know, like there's a bunch of different struggles, and this is just the last test, right? So if that wasn't a thing, right, the story would still be amazing, right? So, yeah. So the moral of the story is that video games and movies are better if they're intrinsically rewarding.
The curtain falls, the music plays, the credits roll, then it all fades to black, and you're left by yourself. The fanfare is gone, there's no player two there by your side to share victories won. But as you slowly progress down the hall to your bed, a few great events leak back into your head from the time that you spent traversing the land, battling evil, fighting the darkness, just sword in hand. Your memories creeping with the edge of a smile. You realize again what you lost for a while. You're gonna think back much less on how you saved the day than on all the experience gained at the end of it all. Gamers play what we play, not for game over, but rather for what we take away. The world is sad, but who cares? We both know that that's not what you came for. Your next adventure already in sight. You're all set to go. You're excited to see what's all wrong till it's right, and the world is saved. So you're more along for the ride.